Russell
Six,
Morris,
seven,
good to have you
nine,
here at
10.
noise11.com. The end of the beginning is where we're going to start, because this is the beginning of the end, I guess, for you. Or is it?
Yeah, you got that right, because that was taken from Winston Churchill. This may not be the beginning of the end, perhaps it is the end of the beginning. So I'd always loved that line. And when the concerts were coming up, Robert Rigby rang me up and said, "Oh, it'd be great if you write a song for the final shows." And I said, "Listen, Robert, I'm not really good at that sort of stuff." And he said, "But try." And so I sat down, and I just lost a really dear mate of mine. He'd passed away. And that was running through my head and thinking, what happens now? Is there another? And then I thought of the Winston Churchill statement. And I picked up my guitar and played two chords and sang the first four lines. And I thought, okay, here's the start. And I know what the story's about. So I probably should be. And I finished it and wrote that song. And it's about someone who has pulled the closure on something because he wants to go back and find parts of his soul that he's lost along the way. And he knows that with this closure, something else will happen. With every end, there's always a new beginning. So that's what that's about.
And knowing you as I know you, this definitely won't be the end. There are going to be more musical projects. I think you'd have a recording studio in the coffin, knowing you the way you were going. Even after you're gone, you'll still be working on new music.
I'm not as bad as Joe Camilleri, who's done like 53 records, which is
Last
unbelievable.
week,
Yeah, he's astounding. Joe is astounding. I do love to write. I won't tour anymore. I just will not do any more touring. If in the future a one-off show comes up and it's really prestigious and it's something I really want to do, I would consider it. But at this stage, no, I won't be doing anything except songwriting and maybe recording at home.
when you did the series of the orchestra concerts, you went back to A Thousand Suns was in there. Jumpstart Diaries got a bit of a run in there. That was a good opportunity to go back and pull out things that didn't necessarily get a lot of play from you over the years. Will these shows also give you the opportunity to dig around, have a look what's back in the archives and pull a few of the old hidden gems out?
Well, probably more so. I've it's very hard for me to choose what songs to do because over the years, because I've changed styles so often, and it's an intentional thing because I get incredibly bored. If I do something ad nauseum, I just lose enthusiasm. So I have to change things up. And I love all styles of music. So along the way, I've done different styles and different things. And yes, I will pull up some songs, but I won't pull them up myself because I'm too close to them. So I've turned it over to Phil Battles and Nick Pringardi and said, listen, go through the catalogue. You pick out songs which you think are great songs that will go over well live, regardless of what they are and where they came from. So they're in the process at the moment of scouring through the tailings, looking for little nuggets.
Well, Jumpstart Diaries, which has just been reissued, and if you have a look on the ARIA chart at the moment, there's various charts, Australian charts and whatever, that actually has a position for that one at the moment. I think Blown Away, I Will Wait for You, and as far as I remember, were played in the orchestrated shows. And because I think the way you described that album at one point was that it was received with a collective yawn, your quote, not
Yes,
mine.
it was completely, yeah.
Yeah, but that also offers an opportunity for people coming along to shows because they're hearing those songs with fresh ears.
They do, and that's always helpful. And it was great with the orchestra because we could introduce them. And incidentally, I never picked them. We had a guy called Tim Schwert who put the show together. And I said, listen, I can't pick the songs. Can you pick the songs? And he went through my catalogue and he picked those songs. And I said, Tim, do you realise these three songs were probably on my most unsuccessful album? He said, yes, but they're great songs. He said, I don't understand it. He said, you asked me to pick the best songs. He said, I've picked them. I think they are great songs. And that's how they came about. And I was really, really excited that he actually picked them because, as it was one of my all-time favorite albums, and I couldn't understand why it never worked. And it's always happened with me. My most cherished albums are the ones that have been the least receptive to audiences or to radio. Put it that way, to radio. Radio has not picked them up and promoted them.
Because what happened immediately after that, we'll talk about in a moment, because that was probably the most successful period that you've had in this very long career. But that album was 2008. A Thousand Suns was 1991. There were other recordings and other projects that you were working on and collaborations that you were doing in between time. But for actual Russell Morris albums, there was a long time in between those two studio albums.
That was because I'd given up. I'd sort of retired then, really, because every time you do an album, it costs you a lot of money. And I remember saying to Jim Keys, Jim, after Thousand Suns, and he said, are you going to do another album? This was quite a way after Thousand Suns, mind you. And I said, no. And he said, what do you mean? Why? I said, because why would I? I said, it costs me a lot of money, a lot of aggravation and anxiousness and an emotional attachment. And I put it out. No one listens to it. No one buys it. No one plays it. Why should I bother? And he said, you should be ashamed of yourself. He said, if you were a master craftsman and you made cabinets, he said, you'd make another one and put it in your warehouse. He said, your obligation is to produce music because that's what you do and that's your body of work, and that you're lucky enough to be able to do that. Whether it sells or doesn't sell doesn't matter. It's irregardless of anything. It's your obligation. So I thought, oh, Jim's right. So then I did Jumpstart Diary, and I was very disappointed that that didn't work either. And then I said to Jim, I'm going to do a blues album. He said, I want to write with you. I'd like to write a song. So Jim and I wrote Black Dog Blues, and that's how that came about. But it was at the insistence of Jim Keys saying to me, stop being so up yourself, just do it.
If we look at A Thousand Suns, it was the right album just at the wrong time. 1991, Pearl Jam was just happening, Nirvana was just happening, you had Metallica in the charts. There was a whole different sound happening when you came along with A Thousand Suns, and it kind of got buried in what was happening with that new grunge sound that was taking over the world at the time.
Yeah, I was probably 2 years too late. Yeah, I brought it out 2 years too late. Should have been brought out a little bit earlier, but that's timing. What is it? Timing in life is everything. Your marbles roll down the hill, and you can't predict where they're going to roll. You can only roll with them. You can try and influence them, but the universe has a different message and a different agenda than us mere mortals do, and we roll in the direction that they roll. And I'd rolled past my point, but it was meant to happen, I guess.
It was a great lineup on there. You were working with Chong Lim, who I saw just out 2 nights ago at Les Mis. He was there as well. But Chong Lim was on that. David Briggs was on that record as well. Vanetta Fields, Mark Punch, Mark Williams. It was a really strong Aussie lineup that was backing you on that record.
It was fabulous. And then we took it to America, and we had some really good American players play on it as well, who were really well renowned. And I was confused. Once I'd done that album and release, I was confused. I thought, wow, my time has definitely passed.
Mm.
Because at that stage, I couldn't get any work anywhere. No one wanted to book me. I was probably doing, if I was lucky, 15 shows a year, and it was pretty broke. And that was when Daryl Cotton rang me up and said, would you like to join Burns, Cotton and Morris for a one-off show? And I was really needed the money. And I said, yeah, sure, I'll do it. We did it. The crowd was huge. We did it. The people who ran the club said, will you do it again in a month? We did it again in a month. was pouring down with rain in Melbourne. And I thought, oh, this is going to be a disaster. We've got them. The line went round the block. After the show, we sat down and said, let's do this. Let's go on the road. That saved me financially.
And
And that was incredible. But after Thousand Suns, I'd given up at that stage of being serious, a serious recording artist because I figured no one really wanted to hear what I had to offer. So what's the point?
yeah, and then like if we go back 10 years before that, you almost have to jump back 10 years from A Thousand Suns to get to Almost Frantic, and so there's 3 albums over the course of nearly 3 decades, and then Sharkmouth hits, followed up by Van Diemen's Red Dirt, Red Heart, Black and Blue Heart, a couple of Jack Chrome albums. This has been your most prolific period ever.
Nothing helps like a little bit of public recognition to give you confidence in yourself. And I know there's people out there who probably lack confidence because they haven't been given the right breaks at the right time. And I was lacking a lot of confidence. And when I did Sharkmouth, I knew it was a nice album, a good album. It was something I'd wanted to write. I wanted to go back to the blues, which I'd started before Ian Meldrum started managing us. And I was happy with it and I loved with it. But the last thing I remember Mitch Cairns, who produced it, saying to me, how well do you think it'll go? Because we couldn't get a record deal. No one wanted it. We went to every major record company. No one would touch it because I was yesterday's hero and I was 60. And then Robert Rigby from Ambition at the last moment said, I'll take it on. And Mitch said to me, he said, oh, well, what can we expect? We've got a record deal. What can we expect sales wise? And I said, listen, Mitch, if we're really, really lucky, we might sell 5,000 copies. I said, if we're extremely lucky, we'll sell 10,000. I said, but it's a blues album. The last blues hit in Australia was probably Still Got the Blues for You. And prior to that was Black and Blue by Chain. I said, it's just not something that people buy. And a lot of people won't be interested in Australian history. And so it proves that I didn't know either because the album just went through the roof.
Yeah, you're like that episode of Seinfeld where George just does the opposite of everything that he instinctively believes, and the opposite works.
It's funny like that. If you look at the real thing, no one wanted it. The record company hated it. Ian and I had to drive around the country knocking on doors of radio stations, which you could do in those days, and asking to see the program director and having a cup of tea and playing him the song and saying, what do you think of this? Oh, this was pretty good. Well, Ian might think it's rubbish. They won't release it. Oh, we'll play it. So we had to do that. So the real thing was not wanted. Then when I get to Jumpstart Diary, no one wanted that either. And I thought, how long did I keep beating my head against the wall? Then when I did Sharkmouth, no one wanted it. And at the 11th hour, someone picked it up. If Robert hadn't have picked it up, it would have sunk without a trace.
Then we had the trilogy of albums. So
Yeah.
we've now got this body of work, which is absolutely brilliant. End of the beginning. All right. So is this the only new song at the moment? Will there be another album?
This is the only new song. I've got a few ideas in the pipeline to start writing, but I haven't got to that point yet. I probably won't get to that point until I finish these final shows. And then I'll probably start writing again, and just for the pure fun of recording, and because writing is that's my true love. I love to do that, but I also hate it because it drives you crazy, because things sometimes you're trying to push a square peg into a round hole, and you finish a song and you think, finally, and you listen to it back and you think, that's rubbish. And there's lots of rubbish that ends up in my bin that never sees the light of day. Probably on my computer at the moment, I'd probably have 50 songs that I've written, and they're just sitting there. I'll probably tap through those and find maybe 3 or 4, because if I do another album, I have to do a really, really good album. So I'll just only pick the very cream of the crop.
You must be pretty thrilled with the way that these shows have sold. How long will this go on? Will you keep adding to it?
We've added a few. We've added Bendigo, we've added Canberra, and we've added Geelong. I think that's it. Because we're doing two at Hamer Hall, maybe three. We're doing two at Twin Towns. We're doing the Sydney Opera House is sold out. Brisbane's sold out. Uh, Thirroul is sold out two shows. Adelaide's sold out. The only tickets left on the big shows are probably Perth, and if we open a third show in Melbourne, they'll be the shows there. But it's only Geelong, Bendigo, and Canberra.
Yeah, you are the self-described Lazarus.
Yeah, yeah. I've risen from the dead. Yeah.
Well, probably more the cat with the nine lives, the way you've been going.
I've had three major lucky things happen in my career which turned everything around. And they were things that I never planned. They just happened accidentally.
Yeah.
And that was meeting Ian Meldrum in Anglesea, and we were on the beach. He'd seen us play the night before and said to us, "Listen, why don't you let me manage you and I'll produce your records and I'll get you a record deal and I'll be your publicist, you know?" And we're so naive, we go, "Oh, that sounds like a great idea," not realizing that he would turn out to be one of the greatest record producers this country's ever had, a phenomenal manager and also a phenomenal publicist. The next one was when I saw a photograph in the newspaper of Thomas Archer being arrested, and I'd been trying to write some blues songs, and they were hollow, they had no heart. I was trying to be John Lee Hooker, and I was writing in that style because I love that, and they just had no heart. And I picked up the newspaper, flicking through, and there's a picture of Thomas Archer in 1918, I think it was, being arrested. And the photo just spoke to me. It just said, "Wow, bring me alive." And I wrote that song, and a light bulb went off in my head. And I thought, that's right. I can't write blues and roots about Mississippi or the Delta. I didn't live there. I didn't experience what those guys did, but I experienced the back streets of Richmond and inner city and gangsters that I went to school with and all those people. That opened up that. So that was another lucky break. And then the other lucky break, which was I really virtually was getting sick of touring. I loved it and I loved all the people, but I'd worked everywhere at least 15 times and it wasn't increasing. It wasn't getting any better. And people were saying to me, like managers and that were saying, "Listen, things aren't, you should be better off than this. You should be doing better than this. Should be doing better." Yeah, don't be ridiculous. Look, I just worked at Byron Blues Festival. We filled the tent, you know. Yeah, so that went on. And then finally, one of your heroes turned up to a gig. And I know you love him so much. And he
But
came
hey,
up to me.
credit where credit is due, though. Credit where
I
he
know.
has. This is one example of a great thing he's done. So
I
you
couldn't,
name him.
but I couldn't believe it. Here's this man who's watching the show, seemed completely disinterested, came up at the end and bought three CDs and wanted to talk to me. And I'm talking about Clive Palmer. And like, if you've seen his TV ads, which I have a pretty good relationship with him, I have told him, I said, "Clive, they're the worst TV ads I've ever seen." And he just laughs. He doesn't care. So he says to me, "You've lost sight of your career, son." I said, "What are you talking about?" And then he said, "You've lost sight of your career. You could be much bigger than this." I said, "Clive, I've packed this place out." And he said, "Yes, but you could be in much bigger places." I said, "With all due respect, I work some places that hold 500 people and I only get 390." I said, "So what are you talking?" He said, "I'm talking about the Sydney Opera House and Hamer Hall and all that." And I said, "I couldn't work those places. Would never happen." He said, "You're blind." He said, "The people who are looking after you are blind. They do not know." And I thought, here's this mining guy who seems to have not a lot of taste telling me what I should do. And I sort of dismissed it. And he got my number, rang up, said, "Have you rethought things?" And I said, "No." He said, "I'm prepared to put you on at the Opera House and do all this." And I said, "It'll be humiliating for me. I can't." I said, "If I get put on at the Opera House and 500 people buy tickets, everyone in the business will know and I'll look like a complete fool." And he said, "You're wrong. You'll pack it out." And I said, "It's not going to happen." He said, we'll paper it if people don't turn up. I said, people will still know. And I said, and you'll lose a lot of money. And he said, I've got a lot of money. So he did. He paid for the arrangements and did all that. And we did 2 shows, which packed out. Then he turned around and he said, the show's yours. You own it. The arrangements are yours. Do what you want. And walked away, which was, he did open my eyes to an audience that I didn't think was there. So I'm a bit guilty as well as my management, I guess, not seeing that.
And some of the greatest shows that I've seen by you ever, and it is available on DVD, so we can put a picture here so that people know where to go and get that if they missed it the first time, but I'm sure they didn't. I'm really looking forward to these next lot of shows, even though it is the final tour. So, Russell, great to see you here at Noise 11.
Oh, it's always great to be with you, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks, I think.